Lincoln Heights, Los Angeles. Two guys roll up on a quiet street, windows down, no talking. They step out, hoodies up, guns out. No hesitation, no warning. First shot, boom. Second shot, boom. One drops, the other barely moves before boom. He's gone too. The bodies hit the ground, the car takes off. No skid marks, no rush, like nothing happened. But something did. A message got sent. A war got fueled. Somebody had to pay. This is Lincoln Heights 13. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you want to hear more about the most dangerous gangs running the streets, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let's get into it. Los Angeles, a city known for fame, fortune, and some of the most dangerous gangs in the country. Before the money, before the movies, these streets belonged to something else, something that never left. Mexican-American gangs didn't start as criminal empires. Back in the early 1900s, they were neighborhood crews, looking out for their own. Kids grew up together, families lived on the same blocks for generations. And when trouble came knocking, they handled it themselves. No police, no outsiders, just them. But over time, something changed. The fights weren't about respect anymore. They were about money, power, and control. Small-time street crews turned into organized gangs, and in Los Angeles, if you didn't belong to one, you were a target. That's how Lincoln Heights 13 started, one of the oldest gangs in the city, dating back over 100 years. They built their reputation early, claiming territory in Northeast LA. Today, their name carries weight. From North Broadway to Daly Street, they own these streets. Their cliques, Parkside Locos, 28th Avenue, Thomas Street, Workman Street, Sechel Street, each one putting in work, keeping their name alive. Then there's El Sereno Rifa, 13, deep roots, deep ties to the Mexican mafia. Their word isn't just law in the streets, it reaches inside the prison system. They don't play games. When they greenlight somebody, that's it. No way out. Their neighborhood, locked down, every corner, every alley. If you're not one of them, you don't belong there. Geraghty Valley Rifa 13. Different story, same results. This gang comes from old-school roots, built by families who fled the Mexican Revolution. What started as a tight-knit community turned into something else. They watched their streets change, watched enemies move in, and when push came to shove, they fought back. But they weren't just fighting for their neighborhood anymore, they were fighting to control it. Lil Valley Rifa 13, smaller than the others, but no less violent. They made headlines for high-profile murders, the kind that put entire neighborhoods on edge. When they put a hit on someone, it's up close, personal, and permanent. East LA is theirs. From Indiana Street to Interstate 5, their reach is felt. Ask anybody who lives there. They know. And then there's Geraghty Loma 13. A different breed. While most gangs fight for corners, they fight from the hills. City terrace high ground, perfect for ambushes. Back in the day, these guys didn't just shoot. They lined up like a firing squad. They had real firepower, M1 carbines, full clips, no warning shots. When they hit, they made sure nobody was walking away. Every gang marks their turf. Walls, sidewalks, freeway overpasses, graffiti tells you who runs what. If you see a name crossed out, that means war. That means somebody's going to pay for disrespecting the set. It's not art, it's a message, and everybody knows how serious those messages are. These gangs didn't take over overnight. It took generations. And once they had control, they weren't giving it up. Lincoln Heights 13. If you've been in Northeast LA long enough, you've heard the name. This isn't some new gang trying to make a name for itself. This is one of the oldest, one of the most established, and one of the most feared crews in Los Angeles. Their roots go back over 100 years. Before the city looked like it does now, before the highways, before the skyline, Lincoln Heights 13 was already here. 13.006. They weren't always a criminal empire. At first, they were a neighborhood gang, looking out for their own. The fight wasn't about drugs or money, it was about keeping outsiders from coming in and taking over. But that didn't last. As the years passed, the game changed. It wasn't about protecting anymore, it was about controlling. and Lincoln Heights took control of their streets. North Broadway to Daly Street, Avenue 26 to Humboldt Street. If you're in that area, you're in their territory. The graffiti on the walls, that's them. The cliques keeping their name alive. Parkside Locos, 28th Avenue, Thomas Street, Workman Street, Sickle Street. Each one has its own reputation. Each one plays a role in keeping Lincoln Heights 13 strong. They run their blocks, they check who comes in, and if you don't belong, you're either leaving or you're not walking out at all. This gang isn't built on talk. They handle their business, and they make sure everybody knows it. Drug sales, carjackings, robberies, whatever brings in power and money, they're involved. But it's not about random crimes. They do things with a purpose. When Lincoln Heights moves, it's calculated, and if somebody crosses them, there's a price to pay. 2001. Two men thought they could take something that didn't belong to them. A drug deal went bad, and they walked away thinking they got one over on Lincoln Heights. But no one gets one over on them. It didn't take long before those two men were found. The car was jacked. They were pulled out. No chance to run, no time to talk their way out of it. Execution style. No mistakes, no second chances. Their bodies were left in the street as a reminder. You don't steal from Lincoln Heights. You don't cross them, and if you do, there's only one way it ends. The police know Lincoln Heights well. They've been trying to shut them down for decades. Sometimes they get a few big arrests, sometimes they put pressure on the gang, but Lincoln Heights? They're still here, still standing, still running their streets. The name hasn't faded, and if history says anything, it won't be fading anytime soon. El Sereno Rifa 13. This isn't your average street gang. This is something bigger, something stronger, something with connections that reach beyond Los Angeles. They answer to something much more dangerous, the Mexican Mafia. And when the Mexican Mafia gives an order, it doesn't matter where you are. Inside, outside, you do what you're told. Or you face the consequences. El Sereno isn't just a neighborhood, it's a stronghold. The streets here belong to them, every block, every alley, every corner. If you're in their area, you're under their rules. No outsiders move weight without permission. No one steps out of line without paying for it. And if you're on their bad side, you're on borrowed time. This gang doesn't play small. They don't just rob, they don't just fight, they run extortion rackets. They control drug distribution. And when the call comes in from the Mexican Mafia, they handle business, murders, setups, green lights. That's what separates El Sereno Rifa from other gangs. When they mark someone for death, it's not one guy deciding. It's an order passed down. Once it's set, there's no way to talk yourself out of it. 1992. The Lowell Street Boys thought they could move without permission, thought they could operate in areas controlled by El Sereno Rifa, thought they were untouchable. That was a mistake. The call went out from prison, a permanent green light. That meant any Sereno from any set had permission to take them out. No safe zones, no backing down. If you saw one, you handled it. And just like that, the Lowell Street Boys stopped being a problem. That's the power of El Sereno Rifa, and that's what happens when the Mexican Mafia gets involved. Law enforcement knows how deep this gang runs. The feds have been watching. The LAPD has been making arrests, but locking up a few guys doesn't break them. If anything, it strengthens them, because inside prison their reach only grows. They don't stop operating, they expand, they learn. And when they come back to the streets, they come back with more power than they left with. This gang has survived raids, arrests, and gang injunctions. And through it all, they're still here, still strong, still enforcing the rules set by a criminal empire that doesn't forgive mistakes. In El Sereno, the name means something, and anybody who knows the streets knows exactly what that means. Happy Valley Rifa 13.A. A name that's been around for generations. A gang that didn't start on the streets, but in the struggles of war. Back in the early 1900s, families fled Mexico, escaping the violence of the revolution. They came to Los Angeles looking for something better. But what they found was another fight, new city, same survival instincts. And for the young men growing up in these neighborhoods, the battles never stopped. At first it wasn't a gang, it was a crew, a brotherhood, a group of kids from the same blocks watching each other's backs. But in Los Angeles, things don't stay simple for long. Turf wars broke out, new enemies came into the picture, and survival meant picking sides. That's when Happy Valley Rifa stopped being just a group of kids and became something more, something stronger, something violent. Their territory sits in the middle of it all. Happy Valley and parts of Lincoln Heights. They don't have the biggest turf, but they protect it like it's their last breath. Every alley, every storefront, every corner with their name on it. If you're walking through, you better know where you are, because they do. This gang makes its money the same way others do, drugs, robberies, and anything that keeps the cash flowing. But it's not about small-time hustling. They've got connections, they move product, they get paid, and they don't care who they have to take out to stay on top. 2021 proved that. That year, something changed. Tensions hit a boiling point. More bodies started dropping, more bullets started flying. Gang homicides in El Sereno and the surrounding areas went up fast. Some say it was a turf dispute, some say it was a revenge cycle that never got settled. Whatever started it, one thing was clear: Happy Valley Rifa 13 wasn't backing down. And if somebody had a problem with them, they weren't walking away from it. The police cracked down hard after that. More patrols, more raids, more arrests. But in neighborhoods like this, removing a few gang members doesn't stop anything. It opens the door for the younger ones to step up. The ones trying to prove themselves. The ones ready to take the next shot, do the next job, and carry the name forward. Happy Valley Rifa started as a group of kids caught between two worlds. But now it's something else. Something that doesn't stop, something that doesn't forgive, and in the streets they control, that reputation means everything. Lil Valley Rifa 13. They don't have the biggest name, they don't have the biggest numbers, but what they do have, a reputation, a deadly one. 60 years in the streets of East Los Angeles, and they've made it clear they're not the ones to underestimate. If you think size matters, you don't know how this game works. It's not about how many members you have. It's about how far you're willing to go. And Lil Valley Rifa 13, they go all the way. Their turf is locked down. Indiana Street, Whittier Boulevard, Downey Road. It might not be the largest stretch of land, but that doesn't mean it's up for grabs. This is their home, and they make sure everybody knows it. Every alley, every storefront, every set of eyes watching from a window. If you're there, they know. And if they don't know you, that's a problem. This gang isn't about flexing numbers. It's about impact. They don't do random fights. They don't throw empty threats. They do what needs to be done, and they do it fast. Murders, drive-by shootings, beatings, carjackings, whatever keeps their name in the conversation, whatever keeps their people in line, they handle it, no hesitation. That's exactly how it played out in the case of Eddie Gonzalez, a name that won't be forgotten in East LA anytime soon. First-degree murder, attempted murder. He wasn't some outsider looking for trouble, he was one of them. And when the time came, when a job needed to be done, he pulled the trigger. It wasn't about rage, it wasn't about emotion, it was about business. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. Lil Valley Rifa has made it clear, respect isn't given, it's taken. They've held their ground for over 60 years and they're still standing. The police have tried, the raids have come and gone. Some members are locked up, some have been taken out, but the name still holds weight, and in East Los Angeles, that's what matters, because once a gang like this plants its roots, pulling them out isn't as easy as making arrests. It doesn't end when one generation falls. The next one is already stepping up. Geraghty Loma 13. This isn't like the other gangs. They don't move the same. They don't fight the same. They don't operate on the streets like everybody else. They have something most gangs don't. High ground, city terrace, steep streets, narrow roads, blind spots everywhere. If you don't know your way around, you're at a disadvantage. And for Geraghty Loma, that's exactly how they want it. Because when you control the hills, you control the fight. Most gangs shoot from cars, from alleys, from across the street. Not Geraghty Loma. They think differently. They line up on rooftops, they use elevation to their advantage, and when they strike, it's not random, it's planned, it's calculated, and once it starts, there's no stopping it. Their territory isn't like the flat streets of South Central or East LA. This is terrain, it's a battlefield, and they've been using it to their advantage for decades. The name Geraghty Loma has been around since the 1930s, and back then, they weren't just carrying handguns and knives, they had real firepower. They had M1 carbines, they had rifles, they weren't pulling drive-bys, they were lining up shots like a military unit. And when it was time to go to war, they didn't rush in, they waited, they aimed, and they didn't miss. And one of the most notorious incidents in their history proved exactly that. A rival gang thought they had the upper hand, thought they could move in and challenge them. They didn't make it far. Geraghty Loma members were already in position. They lined up, they took their shots, and when the dust settled, their enemies were wiped out. This wasn't some reckless shootout. This was execution-level precision. It sent a message to everybody. City Terrace belonged to Geraghty Loma. And if anybody wanted to test that, they better be ready for what came next. Over time, things changed. Crackdowns happened. Raids took out some of their strongest members. The new generation wasn't as disciplined. They didn't have the same strategy, the same tactics, and little by little the power of Geraghty Loma started to fade. But the name? It still holds weight. People still remember the way they moved, the way they controlled their territory like a battlefield. And even if their numbers aren't what they used to be, the history is still there, the reputation is still there, and in the streets of Los Angeles, sometimes a reputation is more dangerous than a gun. Los Angeles has changed. The city isn't the same as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Neighborhoods have shifted, new developments have gone up, more cameras, more police, more pressure from law enforcement. But one thing hasn't changed: the gangs. They're still here. They might move differently, they might not be as loud, but they haven't gone anywhere. Lincoln Heights 13 is the police have tried for decades to take them apart. They've locked up members, hit them with RICO cases and raided their hideouts, but the gang keeps going. They control the drug trade in their area, and as long as there's money to be made, they're not giving up their spot. The cliques are still active. The younger generation is still keeping the name alive. And if you walk through Lincoln Heights, you'll still see the tags on the walls letting everybody know who owns the streets. El Sereno Rifa 13 is just as dangerous as ever, and it's not because of their numbers, it's because of who they answer to. The Mexican mafia still runs things from the inside, and when they give an order, it doesn't matter how much law enforcement is watching, that order gets carried out. That's why El Sereno Rifa hasn't been wiped out. Every time the police take out one member, there's another one waiting to take his place. The structure is too strong. The connections run too deep. And as long as the Mexican mafia is in power, El Sereno Rifa will always have a place on the streets. Happy Valley Rifa 13 isn't as dominant as it once was. The crackdowns hit them hard. The new generation isn't as organized. But that doesn't mean they're gone. They still operate in the shadows. They still handle their business when they need to. They've taken losses, but the name hasn't disappeared. And in gang culture, a name means everything. If there's still respect on the streets, if people still fear you, then you still exist. And for Happy Valley Rifa, that's enough to stay alive. Lil Valley Rifa has always been smaller. They never had the numbers of the bigger gangs. But what they do have is younger members who don't care about playing it safe. They want to prove themselves. They want to be recognized. That makes them dangerous. These are the guys willing to take risks, willing to make a name for themselves at any cost. And as long as they keep pushing, as long as they keep handling business, the gang stays active. Maybe not as strong as it once was, but still there, still a problem. Then there's Geraghty Loma 13. They were once one of the most feared gangs in City Terrace. They controlled the high ground. They planned their attacks with precision. But over time, their power started to fade. The old ways of doing things, using military-style tactics, setting up ambushes, don't work the same way in a city covered with security cameras and police drones. The younger generation isn't as disciplined. Some got locked up, some got taken out. Now, the gang isn't what it used to be. The name still means something, but the power? It's not what it once was. Law enforcement knows these gangs aren't going away on their own. That's why they've changed how they fight them. The LAPD and the FBI aren't just doing random busts anymore. They're going after entire organizations, RICO cases, federal indictments. Instead of locking up one or two guys, they're taking down leadership, the ones making the calls, the ones running the drug trade. It's a slow process, but it's working. Some of the biggest names in these gangs are behind bars because of it. Wiretaps, undercover informants, surveillance. Law enforcement has stepped up their game. Every phone call is being listened to, every move is being watched. That's why gangs are changing the way they operate. Less talking, more caution. But at the end of the day, the game is still the same. Money, power, control. And as long as there's a way to make money, as long as there's power to gain, there will always be gangs in Los Angeles. The old names are still here. But something else is happening. New gangs, smaller crews, groups that don't follow the same rules as the old school gangs. They don't have the same structure, the same discipline, but that makes them unpredictable, more violent, more reckless. They don't care about long-term power. They care about making a name for themselves right now, and that makes them just as dangerous as the ones that came before them. The police can keep making arrests, the feds can keep running cases, but gangs in Los Angeles, they're not going anywhere. They've been here for over 100 years, and unless something changes, they'll be here for 100 more. The truth is, gangs don't disappear overnight. You can arrest one leader and another one takes his place. You can shut down a drug operation and a new supplier will pop up the next day. You can raid one neighborhood and the crime will move somewhere else. Because this isn't about one gang, one person, or one block. This is about power, control, survival. And as long as there's money to be made, as long as people grow up in the same broken environments, as long as the streets remain the only way out for some, gangs will continue to exist. It's easy to say, just arrest them all. It's easy to believe that gang injunctions and surveillance will put an end to it. But history has shown that's not how it works. The police have been fighting gangs in Los Angeles for over 100 years, and yet here we are, still talking about them, still seeing the graffiti on the walls, still hearing about bodies turning up in the same neighborhoods, still watching generations fall into the same cycle. So the question is, can it really be stopped?